Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 38 of the False Prophets podcast. I'm your host, Phil Risden. Manny Perez is indisposed right now. We're currently moving around. We're moving different spots and everything. So he's busy. I had a little bit of extra time, so I decided to squeak in this episode. And you know what? It's a good thing Manny's not here, because this is by far the blackest episode we will be having, okay? There's been a lot of things going down right now in the black community. Just Pearly Things has recently come under fire and quote-unquote been exposed as a racist by other black people. If you guys don't know who Just Pearly Things is, she is a white female YouTuber who is in the manosphere sector. So you know people like Kevin Samuels. That's it. No, Fresh and Fit, Andrew Tate, those types of guys. She kind of deals in that arena, talking about men and women, relationships, and this, that, and the third. And yeah, man, she lives in the UK. She's American, but she lives in the UK, and she's kind of been like talking about all this stuff for quite a while now. She's someone who's rose to fame really, really fast. I'll be honest. It happened really quick. I'll be real with you. Like I know the algorithm is like working against me. You know what I mean? And finding all my shit, because I'm like, how is she in my shit? Like they were like, oh, this nigga likes Fresh and Fit, and then he watches blacked.com for porn. Okay, he's gonna like a white girl who puts women in their place. That's how I know this shit is Google. I know you niggas is paying attention. All right. But she got planted in everybody's shit. She blew up like wildfire, bro. She's everywhere right now. And what's interesting about her is that, being in the UK, all that type of shit, that's cool. That's interesting. But she has a lot of black people on her platform. And now what she's being called into question is she had, favorite Kanye collaborator, Nick Fuentes, who's a white supremacist. Don't let the last name fool you. This nigga is a white supremacist. He once called the black vote the nigger vote. This guy he's very open about how he feels. I guess because, Kanye picked him up and put him on his shoulders like some Make-A-Wish kid. He feels like now he can go and traipse around to these other places. He hasn't really gone to full-on black platforms, but he has started stepping in these zones of white platforms that have been built on the backs of black people. So, for instance, he was on Adam 22's No Jumper podcast, I believe. And now he's on Just Pearly Things. If you don't know anything about the whole situation, it was kind of more her saying that she appreciates African black people more than American black people, basically insinuating that they are lazier, and basically saying that Africans are better workers, which does not sound great, especially when you're hanging out with a white supremacist, and you're a rich, white girl, talking about talking about how how good of workers Africans are. That's not a good look. Number one. Also, two, that really got her called out as a racist because it caused a divide of black people as far as, FBA, which stands for Foundational Black Americans, versus FBN. And that's a term I actually made for myself, which is Foreign Black Nationals. Okay, so FBN would be something like my family. Right. So my mother would be an FBN. She's from my mother and father are both from Jamaica. Right. So they're from a foreign black nation, a nation where the people and their money look like them. The doctors are them. The lawyers are them. The judges are them. The police are them. The government is them. OK, versus here where all those other things are someone else. OK, and basically, a lot of people don't really know this. I think if you're definitely not in the black community, there has always been slight friction between FBAs and FBNs. There's always been this whole thing about people who come from foreign black countries thinking that black Americans are very, very lazy. And a lot of FBA, FBA people, black Americans, think that a lot of foreign black nationals, FBNs, think that they're better than American black people or African Americans. It's weird for, I think, a lot of FBNs who are here as the first generation that is born in America, because we see what both sides are talking about and both sides are correct. I think that's a really, really interesting thing, right? Because, again, my mother, she was here, single mom and all that type of stuff, but she tried to instill a lot of knowledge in me, right? And Jamaican culture has this big root of independence. I think that's a big thing too, where even in different countries that are predominantly black, when they talk about slavery, it's like, yes, slavery happened, but we won and we drove all of them out of there. So there's this sense of victory and independence that is inherently there from being a black person. Not to mention how they instill education in their kids. I feel like, when your parents come here from a different country, they kind of live vicariously through you. So even if they have a good foundation for you to live through, whether they're an engineer, a doctor, or who knows, it could be some sort of smaller job. They're a janitor and they look up at the moonlight and think about one day their son's gonna, run for Congress. I don't fucking know. But regardless, they live vicariously through you, and they use that. They live vicariously through you in kind of the way that a father or an American father would live vicariously through their own son or their daughter in athletics, right? So like the way that what is it, LeVar Ball and his dad like attacked basketball, that's the way that like Nigerians and shit attack medicine. My upbringing is a lot closer to somebody who is maybe Chinese or Indian rather than somebody who is African American. And that's not by and large, but realistically, that kind of is what it is. What I want to make sure to mention, though, is that even with all those things that I just told you, my mother forcing books on me, my mother trying to quiz me on certain things, my mother trying to get me tutors for certain things, kind of going above and beyond as a parent for my education, while I was dealing with that, I'm still enduring life as a black American, and I'm still absorbing the mentality that other black Americans have. And I'm not saying the mentality that they give to each other. I'm saying the mentality that is bred into us, that is poured into our minds as being lower, just being lesser, not as smart, it not being, popular to read, and all these things. Always being obsessed with being the coolest, and at a young age, being the smartest definitely is not being the coolest. All these things are very real, and they make you not want to go after things. And also, let's talk about it. I mean, I brought up Chinese and Indian kids, right? And how my upbringing was probably a lot closer to those children, but me being in those sectors with those children, I was discriminated against. I wasn't made to, even if I was just as smart as they were, even if I worked just as hard as I did, they perceived me for being lazy. You see what I'm saying? They tried to diminish every accomplishment that I tried to go after, or any accomplishment that I achieved. And this is something that I think the black African American goes through on a daily basis, minus the mom coming home and quizzing him about books. So he doesn't have the mom coming home quizzing him about books, but he definitely does have it not being cool with his friends that he's into certain things, right? And, people in his environment and in his neighborhood not propping those things up. And then even if he's one of those few that fucking pulls himself up by his bootstraps and gets him there where he needs to be, there will be people there, not just white people, but other minorities as well, who will pretend as if his accomplishments mean nothing. And when you're born in that kind of cage, that social cage, I think you start to think, well, why even bother trying to break out? And I think that's a big thing that's a big reason for why, Black Americans might not be striving for as much. Number one, their faces are not on their money. Okay. A lot of Black American history is not told to them in any way. 99% of the history is about another motherfucker. All right. And then on February, they give them a whole month of old reels of them being beaten to shit by white people. Okay. And this is reminiscent of all the shit you had taken away. Isn't that sad? Meanwhile, none of the education of any of the things that we ever created are given to us. None of our real contributions. And I'm not just talking George Washington fucking Carver and Frederick Douglass, dude. I'm talking about, not even just Black Wall Street. The fact that there are multiple Black Wall Streets. The fact that even though segregation was not necessarily right, the concept of integration and them breaking down Black banks, Black schools, all Black businesses, essentially, and dissolving those things to either be absorbed by the whites or because of people's admiration of the thought of white being something bigger because of segregation and because of racism, that caused things to diminish in the Black economy. These are all things real, and we haven't even gotten to the crack epidemic. It's interesting because if you pull it back on a macro level and you kind of zoom out a little bit, you realize that the reason why Black people move from these foreign countries to America is because the things that were done to Black Americans are the same things that were done to their nations. Okay, so we actually don't have as much of differences as you actually think, and I know people are probably a little confused by that. Let me elaborate in this sense, right? So a lot of people, whether you're Nigerian, Ghanaian, Kenyan, Jamaican, Eritrean, Trinidadian, Haitian, whatever, right? People will say, oh, like, these Americans are so lazy, they're ungrateful, they don't know what they're doing, they must just be stupid, right? But then a FBA, a foreign Black American, a foundational Black American would say, well, if we're so stupid and you're so great, how come your country is such a shithole? How come your country is terrible? Because that's the thing. If you guys are all so great, but if Nigeria is so great, then why are you coming over here to do anything? Okay? And that's a perfectly reasonable and that's a perfectly true statement to make. Okay? And the reason why they are coming over here to America to do things is the same reason why people in America don't necessarily have enough. That's because colonizers took over certain resources and different things to make these societies, these foreign Black nations, not as strong as they could be. They do have tons and tons of, very smart professionals and, tons of people who score high on fucking doctors' tests and this, that, and the third. But when your country doesn't own any of the resources that are within the country, your country doesn't get to fund itself to create those schools to have those future doctors, get the best education they can right in their own home country. You like those people, the Nigerians, the Africans as a whole, the people in Caribbean countries as a whole, they've been robbed of that. In the same way that foundational Black Americans have been robbed of their assets as well. They were brought to America. All right. They didn't have shit. They weren't allowed to read and fucking write, bro. They originally they were, and then niggas were too smart. So they started getting their fucking limbs cut off every time they fucking had some sort of, any sort of rebellion. And these white people We're like, all right, well, they're rebelling too much. There's too many different things going on. So what we have to do is we have to make sure that they have no real education, and then we have to separate them over arbitrary things. We can't just make it a simple "we'll kill you" thing, because obviously quality of life and dignity is worth way more than pain. So these people endure pain all day to have dignity as a human being. What we need to do is we need to fool them, and we need to break their brain and think that the person to the left of them and to the right of them is their enemy, and not the person staring at them with a whip, you know? And in a way, because of colonization, that slave mentality has kind of translated over to Africa and over to black nations as well. I mean, if you really want to break it down, I mean, you know, black nations were the ones who were selling fucking slaves. And if you want to talk about the diaspora and how they need to come home now, why couldn't have they just stayed home? You know what I mean? And I think that's what I'm saying. I think, you know, the problem, yes, is obviously it comes down to actions and how people see things and everything. But the real thing is unity. And I think right now we really, really, really need unity, but people also need to understand why other people feel certain ways. So I just feel like I had to say that. I'm sorry. I bet you that's probably about 20 minutes of hard-hitting gibberish. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes, man. I don't fucking know, man. I think this is a very interesting thing, though, because I think it's bound to happen, guys. This is growing pains. You know what I mean? And I think if anything, whether you're FBA or FBN, we should be so proud of these discussions that we're having. We should be so proud of these conflicts that we're having, because really what this is a resurgence of proud black culture. You know, I think black Americans, you know, even though they knew what plantation they'd come from, you know, there was, you know, just this feeling of loss of like, well, past that, I don't know. But now I think slavery's been here for so long, and black Americans have such a large footprint in the global culture that I think it gives them a little bit of something to you know, a nice little badge to put on their chest. And I also think, as like I said, the internet is back, you know, or the internet is growing, and it's growing larger and larger, and different people are being seen. It allows for a lot of FBN people to feel seen, you know, as well now too, you know, because you got to think, for them, they've been watching people like Tupac and shit on the TV, and not even on the TV at their house, bro. It's like the one TV in the fucking downtown and shit. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, this isn't for everybody, but I'm saying, like, from certain countries, like, especially, like, you know, I've been back to Jamaica probably like 3-4 times and shit. I didn't really go out to the country, but my brother used to tell me all the fucking time about how he would go down to fucking Jamaica, and it was funny. He was talking about how he visited my cousin Bobby down in Jamaica, and, you know, he's an American kid. So my cousin Bobby, who's not American, is like, yo, like, Kevin, we're going to go to the arcade. And he's thinking it's going to be an arcade with fucking tokens and, you know, fucking, what do they call that? Double Dragon and Metal Slug and Mortal Kombat and, you know, the Simpsons game and all that shit. Guess what? It's a fucking old lady's house with an Atari and a tub of ice cream for the kids. And stuff like that is what people need to understand. Like, even in the hood, there's still an abundance of items. There's an abundance of things simply by living in America. So these people go to the one corner store that has a TV. Honestly, I'm talking about like in the 90s, maybe the 80s, because that's when like I grew up. I'm sure now in like 2023, everybody probably has a TV, most likely. But you know what I mean? That's the kind of the mentality. It's like they'd go to the one fucking shop, the barber shop that has, you know, the TV there, and they'd watch a Tupac music video, and you know what I mean? And so they see this land of like cool shit and prosperity and stuff like that. And, you know, that's something that they want. But now I think because of cell phones and stuff, they're allowed to be seen, and so they can have a little bit of, you know, a little bit of puff in their chest too, and be like, hey, this is my culture. You know, we're all black, but this is my culture and this is yours. And right now, these two are clashing, but I think very, very soon they will be coming and melding together. And I absolutely hope that they do. And I also think that as a whole, too, let's not forget, you know, who the enemy in these types of things are. I mean, you know, FBAs and FBNs want to go at each other, but who's pitting them against each other? Just pearly things. Who is pitting, you know, black people against each other and putting up people like Richard Spencer's Adam 22. Okay, so I think instead of really getting so salty at each other for all these different things and stuff, I think we need to realize that we're still under the same boot. Okay, and it doesn't matter who's on the who's under the toe of the boot and who's under the heel of the boot. We're still under the boot, so we need to come together and just kind of reconcile with each other and make peace and understanding. Yeah, this is like, didn't I tell you this? This was a very serious episode. I felt like I just had to say something. And I feel like these things need to be out there a little bit more, because I think that's another thing too, is people don't realize how many black immigrants there actually are in black America. You know what I mean? And I think so that's one thing where I think if there's anybody who's from another background or something, I hope this was kind of educational or eye-opening for you, you know, to see, because this is something that I think when people think about black people, they only think about black Americans, and at most maybe like a Jamaican dude, and then they'll do like an African accent or some shit, like, you know what I mean? But like, they don't really know the dynamics of what each one is, and I think they think there's this kind of undivided togetherness, you know what I mean? That isn't always there. So I like to create that little illustration for you guys. You know, and just, hey man, like, let's be woke, man. Let's stay woke out here, bro. All seeing eye. Bro, these white niggas, bro, they want us getting on each other. You know what I mean? Just to go back to just pearly things, it's like she built her whole shit off the back of black people. And remember the last time that I fucking did a whole thing with Moxie and shit about this whole issue? I said that she looks like she grew up rich. She looks like she probably grew up very, very white, like, you know, like LL Bean kind of white, which is kind of a dog whistle for racist. Okay. You know, and she probably didn't have that close of a connection with her father. Okay. That's what I said. And that's what I kind of figured drove her to the manosphere. It doesn't surprise me that she has these views. And I think this is an interesting thing, because I think we're finally starting to see kind of the Venn diagram of, you know, conservative white culture and black culture as a whole, because I think people don't actually realize that conservative white culture and black culture as a whole are pretty much the same thing, aside from open racism of like, oh, this person has darker skin, so he shouldn't have things. But that's really the only real difference. Black culture as a whole is very, very conservative, whether it's American black culture, or it's African black culture, or Caribbean black culture. It's very conservative. It's all about the concept of the household. People may come from broken homes, but the concept of having a proper household and having gender roles and having two people to fill those roles is very much a very, very strong precedent in black culture. You know what I mean? The whole concept of not necessarily being that cool with LGBTQIA type stuff, very prevalent in white conservative culture, very prevalent in black culture. So, you know, like I said, so like that and gender roles and stuff, I think are the two real prominent things as far as society that I think that white culture and your white conservative culture and black culture definitely share a lot with each other. So it doesn't surprise me that she could find sort of a niche in this space of black manosphere and then still find it suitable in her mind to have on someone like Nick Fuentes. You see what I'm saying? And then talk to him in this way. Because in her mind, she's just being regular old white pearl. But in our minds and in the minds of our fans, they're going, no, you're someone who understands gender, but also understands black people and understands black culture. And so when you did this, this was a clear betrayal. But to her, she doesn't even see it. She doesn't even understand it. So I think that's something that really needs to be put into context here. I feel like there's really been a severe uptick in like discussion media, especially on YouTube. So you have like a person who's a white supremacist versus someone who is like a Black Panther. That's like a clear, like, opposition type thing. But, so they'll have stuff like that, or they'll have someone like Nick Fuentes, or they'll have someone like Richard Spencer or something like that on, and I will say as a black person, I don't mind those people being on these podcasts, whether it's Adam 22 or just Pearly Things. My whole problem is how they approach these people on these podcasts. I don't mind having them on because I think this might just be something from me as a comedian, just like who I am, in the sense of like, I like open discourse and I like pushing buttons and I like pushing boundaries and seeing where things can go with media and stuff like that. And I think it all does us more good than bad to hear what both sides think of anything, so that possibly we can come together and get some sort of knowledge out of it. Maybe not even each opposing side, but just the listener who's coming up with their own, ideas of who they are and what culture they support, or something like that. So I don't mind having somebody like Nick Fuentes or like Richard Spencer or you could fucking, do a YouTube. I would do a YouTube with fucking David Duke fucking tomorrow. You know what I mean? I wouldn't care. The problem isn't having them on. The problem is not holding them accountable for the things that they've put on the forefront of who they are as a person. Okay? So these guys, you're having them on, but you're not talking to them about what made them Richard Spencer, or what made them David Duke, or what made them Nick Fuentes. You're just talking to them to kick it, bro. And like, yeah, you are kind of like scratching the surface. Like, oh, so that's why they call you you know what I mean? Because Nick Fuentes, he's a very like palatable, very like charismatic, dude. And his last name is Fuentes. So I think there's that whole thing where it's like, I think an average white person who doesn't read too much into him is like, well, if one of the Hispanics is saying all this, then this must be right. You know what I mean? And you can get away with that. But the whole problem is like, yeah, dude, if you're going to be an actual fucking podcast host, you know what these people are famous for. So you need to hold their feet to the fire for a bit, dude. And kind of bring up who they are. And especially if the views of who they are still who they are. People are giving Adam 22 bullshit for like, talking to Richard Spencer with kid gloves. And he did talk to Richard Spencer with kid gloves. It was fucking appalling. It was fucking idiotic, and it was insane. Okay? But I will say the one difference is he's talking to Richard Spencer with kid gloves because Richard Spencer isn't on that shit no more. Okay? And listen, there's probably a bunch of niggas yelling at the screen, well, that nigga says he's not on that shit no more, but I bet you in the back he probably is. And yeah, I agree with you. I don't think he's fully out of there. I think he's just like, time to get out of Dodge. And he just wanted to change his look up. Okay? That's what I think too. But regardless, his public persona is like, hey, I am sorry. Okay? Nick Fuentes' public persona is not that. Is not that at all. In fact, he's trying to make white supremacy palatable for the public. So when you, Pearl, a white woman who's red hair, which, I mean, let's be honest, red hair, like ginger white people are pretty much like the dark skinned niggas of white people. So it's like, not only are you white, but you're the whitest of white. Your skin sizzles in the sun. You are the whitest of white. So for you to be the whitest of white, but have built your entire platform off the backs of black people, and then have Nick Fuentes on to play around and pal around and be like, oh, so that's why they think you're a white supremacist. you're just talking about the dynamic of the country. You know what I mean? That doesn't really help, dude. That doesn't really help. And I'm not saying he couldn't have maybe had some of those things in there and you guys could maybe had that discussion. But, you know, if Adam 22 was fighting with kid gloves, I mean, this bitch is fighting with two kittens on the end of her fucking fists. This is nothing. It couldn't have been softer. So even that is inherently racist. And then to go in to talking about FBAs versus FBN, and for you, again, the whitest of all whites, to be staking your claim on which Negroes, you know, work the hardest and really put their back into it is not a good look, and I think you should personally be ashamed. Now, do I think this will really change much of her life? No, because she's so big now that I think boat shoe wearing date rapist white guys probably have her as a subscriber on their fucking feed or whatever. So they'll support her and they'll be fine. She's going to lose a good chunk of her shit, though. I will say that. She's going to lose a good chunk of, you know, the viewership. And then we'll see how things go depending on whether or not the people she works with on set choose to stay on. Because that's a big thing, too. It might be the dynamic where she might not only have to deal with this, but she might have to literally completely skew white now. Which is tough because it'll make her opinions and her general thoughts on things seem a lot harsher. Because like I said, black culture as a whole is a bit more conservative, so it's okay. Whereas white conservatism is often akin to extremism. So people might see her in a different light. You know what I mean? You know, there's a difference between being Adam 22 and Milo Yimatopoulos or whatever the fuck the guy's last name was. You know what I mean? Like they would look at somebody like Adam 22 a little bit better. Milo, not as good. You know what I mean? You can be Bill Maher. Bill Maher is fine. But to be fucking Gavin McInnes, that's a thing. You know? So I do wonder where she'll go from here. But, you know, best of luck. And to all the niggas out there still working for her, bro, you better put in your 2 weeks, bro. Because if you don't, just know you're a fucking fraud. All right, let's get off that. On a lighter note, I just want to shout out the FBN president, DJ Academics, for finally holding DJ Drama, Meek Mill, and Drake's feet to the fire about apologizing to Quentin Miller. I feel like that is something that is a really cool thing that I felt like he had to speak on. And you know what's funny is that, like, I think it should have happened a long time ago. DJ Drama, if you guys don't know, you guys obviously know the whole Drake, Meek Mill thing, you know, where Meek Mill exposed Drake for having ghostwriters, right? And then Quentin Miller was the ghostwriter. It all happened because Drake was trying to fuck or had fucked DJ Drama's girlfriend. You know, supposedly Meek Mill was a little insecure, thinking that Drake was probably going to fuck Nicki Minaj. Also, too, Meek Mill wanted Quentin Miller to write some rhymes for him. Quentin Miller said no because I only work with Drake. And for that, he was exposed. You know, obviously, this, you know, destroyed Quentin Miller's career and kind of made him a nobody who kind of has to work super, super underground. And the rest of them are all just chilling, buddy. And it doesn't seem to matter. And, you know, this is a whole thing that when it happened back in like 2017, this was like a big deal. I remember this was like the hugest fucking deal in the world. And to see how they're all just back except for Quentin Miller, it is hurtful. And it is fucking lame. You know, especially because this guy, his name is like Poison. You know, and being somebody who works in comedy, I know how that is about reputation and stuff like that. And, you know, he went from somebody who had the biggest reputation underground. They didn't tell anybody he had a big reputation. You know what I mean? He had a big reputation among all the artists. You know what I mean? But he had a great reputation working on one of the biggest projects, pretty much one of Drake's best albums, if not Drake's best album. You know what I mean? to now being this hidden thing where if anybody works with him, now they're going to be exposed as some fake hip hop person. You know what I mean? To the point where he worked on Nas's last album, King Disease 3. And on King Disease 3, he's a writer on the fucking album, and people are trying to fucking hunt for him again now and be like, oh, well, what the fuck does this make Nas? And it's like, bro, this guy's just trying to eat. So I did think that it was really, really cool for Akademiks to kind of bring that up, talk about all that type of stuff, and kind of hold them accountable. And I think this is a bigger thing of, you know, kind of holding people accountable in the hip hop community, because I feel like, you know, this is one of those things where in show business in general, people just kind of chew you up and spit you out. And a lot of people are very disposable and are treated as very, very disposable. But in hip hop, I think it can even be worse, because in hip hop, there's this kind of allure and this myth and this delusion that these people do every single bit of it themselves, you know? And if you don't do every single bit of it yourself, you're a fraud and you're a loser and you're actually not a real rapper. And because everything's about credibility in hip hop, especially, that will cause that rapper, once he's called into question for his credibility, to cut off anything that might lead to somebody finding some sort of chink or crack in his armor, you know? And, you know, it's a shame because, you know, once again, we're talking about FBA, FBN, and kind of black unity and black leadership. And like, not for nothing, bro, hip hop and black culture in that sense, as far as artistry, is one of the real ways that black people in this country specifically are starting to gain generational wealth. Okay. And I think this whole mentality of this, yeah, I'm that nigga and I do it myself, and like, oh nigga, the bars is only me, and bro, it's like, yo, all these other fucking genres get to have songwriters. They do. And why not put more money in another black man's hand, bro? Why not? Why not, bro? Like, so yes, I'm not gonna lie and sit here that yes, when I hear certain rhymes and I'm like, this nigga, and you hear the story like, oh, this nigga fucking stayed up all night for this shit. He had a beat, he had this one beat, and he said 8 hours, and he couldn't even fucking sleep. And as soon as he was about to fall asleep, the whole verse came into his mind. He split it out in one take, and then he's gone. And that beat was called a milli. It's like, yeah, you hear that shit and chills do go up your spine, okay? Fucking goosebumps do come on your fucking skin. Pause. All right, they do. All right, but at the same time, it's like, bro, this is an industry, man. This is an industry. These people are talented, bro. And yeah, you know what? In the arts, some people aren't that talented and they get propped up too. Sorry, that's how it happens. All right. I know tons of people who aren't that talented who have a lot more money than me. Okay. That's just how it happens. And I think, you know, that's another type of, shade or another part of the spectrum in the mentality of, you know, black versus black and stuff like that. And I think it doesn't show up in that way because it's just the artistry. So it's more like, I'm an artist. But if you actually think about it, it's like, no, we all have these talents. We're all doing these different things. You are great and you're an amazing writer in your own, but you're also the face. And yeah, if you want to be having all these hits, like, sure, have a little help with the hook. It's fine. You know, what's the harm in, you know, throwing a black guy a couple bands to make the chorus? It's okay. You'll survive. Doesn't mean you're not as good of a rapper. Like, who the fuck cares? You know, but that's just my 2 cents. That's just my 2 cents and stuff like that. But I think it deserves a discussion. So I wanted to say shout out to Ak for doing that. But also leave my nigga Flacco alone, okay? Flacco from No Jumper Podcast. If you guys don't know, obviously No Jumper coming under a lot of fucking flack for the whole fucking, you know, Richard Spencer thing, the whole Adam 22 allegations, T-Rel and AD leaving, and Flacco's still there, which, listen, if Flacco wants to be there, he wants to be there. But I do want to say, I don't like how Akademiks, like, you know, that's the thing about Akademiks. I do love his energy because it's kind of like an all or nothing energy. Because he'll like blast off with some crazy shit, but then be mad reasonable on one thing. So but I don't agree with him calling like Flacco and shit like a house nigga. He said that a couple times. You need to leave the plantation, all that type of shit. I don't like that type of talk, and that's what I mean. That's divisive black talk. That being said, shout out to Act because you're still putting this nigga on your stream and shit like that. But he's a strong black creator too in his own right. And even if he still fucks with Adam, you don't have to demean him in that certain way. But anyway, this is too inside baseball shit. Unless you niggas fuck with all this shit, you're probably like, what the fuck does any of this mean? I'm going to listen to Comedy Bang Bang. And I feel you, because Scott Ackerman is fucking hilarious. And I don't do impressions or characters. This is just me, my nigga. This is just me, baby. All right. But that has been the False Prophets podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to listen to us on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get podcasts. Like, share, subscribe, this, that, and the third, blah, 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 blah. We love you. Have a good one. Peace.